Carrie, you being new to this team, I thought that would be beneficial as well.
Great idea. Yeah.
This is just, it's a good reminder for all of us to know what Jason and Pam do on a daily basis and what they produce out of their office. So, Jason and Pam, I'll let you take that away.
Thank you very much. I don't know if we had intended for an oval chart to be included in the board packet, so I don't know if that made it, but I'm going to share my screen. And there's not a lot of literature to it, just highlights of things that the Student Learning Office navigates. So I'm going to share my screen now. And just a reminder, when I do that, I can't see your faces. So if you want me to stop at any time, just holler, please. And I'm not going to read the document to you, but I am going to walk us through some of the highlights of the document. So if someone could just tell me if you could see this oval document, it'd be appreciated.
Yep, you're good.
Yep.
All right. So again, I'm going to hit about 5 of these points, and then if you have any questions along the way or after, please feel free to do so. I'm going to start at 12 o'clock on our document around aligned and flexible professional development. In the middle is probably the most important part. We're always working for high quality teaching and learning for all. But at that 12 o'clock marker, you'll see professional development. Some of the things that our office navigates is working towards systematizing and differentiating professional development opportunities, really focused around literacy, math, EL, English learners, principals, our student learning liaisons, those teacher leaders, and then our dean of students. So those are some of the professional development groups that we organize professional development for. And sometimes we're navigating or connecting with our CISA reps to provide that. Sometimes we're providing that professional development in-house, and sometimes it's a mix of both. And we also, in addition to the Student Learning Office, facilitating or organizing some of those professional development opportunities, we also work with building leaders as they organize some learning at their building. We also work with elective teacher leaders and science and social studies leaders to organize some professional development in their content areas. I'm going to move us along to, I think it's around 2:30 o'clock there, the continuous improvement model. It's another, I would say, large component of what we do. And when I think of continuous improvement, I think of really 2 things. One is we're always thinking and talking about the professional learning community model, where the 3 big tenets of that is collaboration, a results orientation using data, and a focus on learning. And the other component of continuous improvement I think about is action planning. So our office supports building action plans. Our office supports and develops a technology action plan. And we also develop an action plan for the Student Learning Office. And all those action plans are different, but have common themes. And the themes are, we always are starting with data, a data deep dive. We write some goals, and then we talk about the actions month to month often that support the achievement of those goals. I'm going to do one more, and then I'm going to take a pause. I think it's about 5 o'clock on the oval there, where you'll see a commitment to leadership and coaching. And I want to just talk about some of those. And there's really 2. There's many more, but really 2 main areas that when I think of commitment to leadership and coaching. One is that we have worked with our principals for the last 3 years to provide a coaching for leadership model. So our building leaders are divided into 2 cohorts, and they connect once a quarter to talk about leadership and coaching. And then they have individual opportunities between those cohorted meetings to meet with our CISA connection for some individualized coaching. So for example, her name is Kathy Clarkson. Kathy Clarkson would connect with Mr. Durkis, for example, between those quarterly sessions to provide one-on-one coaching around any topic that is important to Mr. Durkis at the time. And that leadership for coaching has been going on for 3 years in our district. Another aspect of that leadership piece is what we've talked about here, and I think we had some partners visit us from DayRoot. And those DayRoot partners have been working with all building leaders around equity for this is our first year, and we hope to continue to work with them for the next 2 or 3 years. In addition, we have that large, I think it's 35 people, SLL, that's Student Learning Liaison Group, the teacher leader group, that our Student Learning Office works with monthly, and we provide some professional development to that group, but also support their work when they're working with their teams during those in-service days. I'm going to take a break there, and I have a couple more that I want to highlight, but I want to take a break if there's any questions at this time from kind of 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock on the oval there.
Jason, I do have some questions. Do we have funds available for teachers aside from SLLs bringing them professional development? Say there's something they want to attend that might pertain to something they're interested in or something that they're actually teaching. It used to be teachers could attend conferences and such. Have we done away with that? Are there funds available? And if so, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, certainly this is a unique year, so I'm not going to really speak to our pandemic time here, but
right, thank you.
In a typical year, we really have two opportunities for teachers. One is that by passion or interest, how it connects to their content, we've asked teachers to just connect with their building leaders. So our building leaders have a budget that they have discretionary dollars to support some of that work. And then we also, the next step above that is really the Student Learning Office. And when we start seeing multiple people requesting kind of the same learning, then we start thinking about how the Student Learning Office can support that, knowing that there's multiple people, multiple buildings, and then we start thinking about how does that impact the district, and we'll support it that way. In addition, I know you said outside the SLL group, but each SLL does have discretionary dollars and identified team members that they can also support some professional learning for individuals or small groups as well.
So in other words, you're kind of saying not really. Teachers can't just request to go to a conference or something that they're interested in doing pertaining to their curriculum. They have to go through their SLLs or the principals.
Well, I'm saying
usually that's the route they have to go and what they use. So they can't go out individually and find something that they're interested in or applies to their classroom.
I am saying absolutely, but we're just ask teachers to connect with their SLL, principal, or Student Learning Office group to finance that. But absolutely, we encourage that.
Okay, and so do we have the kinds of funds to allow our teachers to do that? Say if a big, we're talking a money year here too, though. Do we have like significant funds for our teachers for that development?
I would say we do not have significant funds, but I would also say that working with either the teacher leader, principal, and/or Student Learning Office, we are able to provide those opportunities for teachers. And sometimes we combine budgets. So sometimes we split between Student Learning Office and building budgets. But we start with yes and work towards no only if we have to. I guess I would say that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Kathy, just so you know, those oftentimes come before the board. So Jason's right, it's a quirky year, but you'll hear those, as things become safer, you'll hear those come before the board, and and see just how much professional development is being utilized in that manner.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I've not been privy to that yet. I got to come on board in the midst of this, so yeah.
Any other questions, kind of noon to 6 o'clock at this time? Again, I can't see you, so I'm not hearing anything. So I'm going to move to 9 o'clock, where it's listed the student milestones of success. And I believe it was about 4 years ago that we started conversations around the data sets we would collect around student achievement and student growth. And we called those the student milestones of success. And we have 4 of those milestones that are centered around math and literacy. And then we also have some milestones that involve student engagement, student participation in co-curricular activities, and then school to work or school to college experiences, such as work experiences, such as AP courses, honors courses. And we, again, this is a very unique year. We were collecting that data and presenting that data to the members of the curriculum committee every July. Many of those data sets we will not be in a position to collect. So for example, we have a math and literacy milestone that involves STAR testing. We will not likely STAR test at all this year. So it'll be very difficult for us to give an update this year. But we're also beginning to have conversations with many stakeholders about are the student milestones as they are the right milestones? And we're in initial conversations, and we'll take those conversations across grade band, across stakeholder groups, but we want to make sure that our student milestones of success reflect the data that we want to collect and show growth. So we'll certainly provide an update if anything changes, but that's just another thing that the Student Learning Office navigates. The last one I would like to draw our attention to is the Aligned Digital Learning Plan. And the Student Learning Office also works with our wonderful Teachnology team. And the Teachnology team has certainly come to the forefront in the last 12 months. And when we talk about Teachnology, we're really talking about a number of components. So we think about curriculum and instruction and assessment and the role of technology in those pieces. We think about how we use space and time as it relates to technology. We think about our infrastructure, and I think we heard from our partner, Mr. Peterson from Heartland, when he talked a lot about infrastructure and the importance of infrastructure in the end product, the use of devices in the classroom. We think about data and privacy and student information. That's all tied to technology. And we talk about community partnerships. And the final piece is really how do we provide professional development across the district. So again, I'm not hitting on all the pieces of the clock there, but I wanted to speak to some of them. And any questions about kind of the Student Learning Office, any components of the OVAL that I didn't directly speak to?
I guess I do, because I think this is an opportunity. We've never really met one-on-one as you guys are directors, but I have 2 questions. So the first is, can you run by a day in the life of your jobs, a brief run through? And the other is, what's the difference between what you do, Jason and Pam? What are your roles specifically?
Sure. It's an interesting question about a day in the life, because about 3:30 this afternoon, we met with a teacher that is going through a curriculum and instruction program. So looking to get some hours for the program, the certification. And we use this OVAL as kind of the center of the conversation about, do you want to focus on one of the spokes or all of the spokes? And what we talked about is a day in the life is often hitting many of these spokes, right? So the example I gave her was this Tuesday. The day started with meeting with Manitowoc Public Library partners, talking about how they're going to support summer school and be involved in summer school. We talk about equity and their work around equity and our work around equity and how we can partner around that, and any forthcoming events in either the district or the library that we can keep each other in the loop, but also support. The next part of my day was around a math check-in. I met with Lori Williams about some Bridges professional development and how's it going, what's the plan, and how can we support that. The next part of my day was with LTC reps and high school reps talking about college here now that we spoke to at one of our previous meetings. Mm-hmm. How are we progressing towards the implementation of that and what needs to take place? Stop me if you want me to stop, but I'll just keep going. The next thing on my agenda was meeting with someone that helps me with the IT budget, talking about how we doing this year. Are we going to have enough money to get to the end of the year? What do we need to order? What things do we need to renew and put us in a good position? Our next meeting was with School Perceptions about the parent and student engagement surveys that we're going to give you an update later, and just planning for that execution. Then we meet with 3 members of the Teachnology team every week to say what's the hot topics of the day, what's going on, are there things that we need to talk about today, what are we going to, how will we navigate the rest of the year, what are we thinking about for the summer and beyond. The next session was back with Lori Williams talking specifically about K-5 math professional development for the summer and next year. We have a chart that we're working on, action planning for that. And then the evening concluded with the elementary principals. We meet with grade banded principals every week as a check-in, especially this year, around their the focus really. They create the agenda. Tuesday night was transitioning to face-to-face. That's a day.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I'd be assuming. Oh, I'm sorry, Kathy.
No, go ahead, Carrie. It was just I just had that second question, but you obviously.
Go ahead.
Well, go ahead.
Oh, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Oh, I thought you were talking about what he was just answering, though. So I just was asking for like the differentiation between the 2 jobs and what they both do. Like who kind of does what.
Yeah, there's much overlap, right? So in that Tuesday, there were some of those opportunities that are my calendar that were also on Pam's. So I would say that Jason takes the lead on things like math, science, some of those curricular areas, technology. There's money overlaps in other areas. Pam, I don't want to speak for her, but Pam really does a lot with assessment, EL, and literacy.
Okay.
So, and then we each supervise the building leaders, so principals, not associate principals. Mm-hmm. So those are divided between us as well, and we work to support them in any way we can.
Okay, thanks. That helps.
Any other?
So I'm assuming that this year, all kinds of issues and questions and like, I don't know how to do this sort of stuff came up. And I mean, people pretty much were, had their skills and did their thing professionally. And then all of a sudden, most of that stuff was off. I mean, virtual learning and teaching is something that most people hadn't thought about much or certainly hadn't practiced much. And if anybody was as technically challenged as I am, I think they probably had a lot of anxiety about how to do it effectively in a mediated way with Zoom and computers and whatever. So was your office the primary agent through which this stuff was handled?
I would say the student learning office, certainly working in concert with every director, but really worked hard to navigate anything that smelled like walk like or quack like teaching, learning, assessment, and technology.
Okay.
Certainly, there's been a number of transitions, as you pointed to. But I think we talked about the last curriculum committee meeting. The number of high quality, dedicated professionals in our district is amazing. And we really doubled down, in my opinion, in the last year around this idea of collaboration, right? We are constantly meeting with teacher leaders, building leaders, each other, just to connect and make sure we're on the same page. Our messages are connected, our strategic plans are connected, getting feedback along the way, and then executing the plan and evaluating that plan along the way.
Okay. All right.
Okay. That's great stuff. Thank you so much for sharing all that, Jason. I appreciate it. And again, it's nice. It's a good review, but also I learned stuff along the way too, which is awesome. We're going to move into our next agenda item, which is a presentation by Mr. Durkis about the Excel program.
Well, thank you very much to allow me to provide a quick update on where accelerated learning currently is in Manitowoc. So we have a small but mighty team behind the scenes that looks at accelerated learning and how we make the process better for our students. That team refines the process, gets information out, and we're continually looking to send out updates and keeping information in the know of principals, counselors, and teachers. The process for a student looking at acceleration really starts in the summer data digs, and then at the start of the year when the teams meet for PLC. And teachers meet together, they look at longitudinal data. Some of that data is the data that Mr. Bull has talked about a little earlier this evening with, STAR assessments. We can look at state and district. The data crunch continues down with the classroom performance data, so our common formative assessments. So teachers working in like teams, maybe grade band, subject matter, depending on, if it's elementary, middle, or high school and how they meet. And all of a sudden, we'll have some students that kind of are outliers. You got most of the class is kind of hovering here, and Susie might be moving up on the radar, really moving above what some of her classmates are moving. So then they'll meet and talk about Susie, and they can set goals, let the parents know that, hey, your daughter's really doing well, and just, we're going to keep working to pushing to get the most out of your child. The teams can continue to work. And eventually, if Susie's continuing to be up and above, we'll start what we call a 360 process. And from there, we look at data, reading, writing, math, behavioral, socializations. And the 360 gets named because kind of like that last diagram we saw, it looks at the whole child and how they're performing. And that team, again, will set some goals, and they would re-meet maybe 2 to 4 weeks. Depends on the subject, English or math, they might have a longer or shorter range goal. And if that child continues to do well, they would work their way through the process. At the end of the day, a student who is really about 3 grade levels beyond would really qualify probably for a DEP, so a differentiated educational plan. It's really about 1% or less of our student population. And there, that plan really looks at meeting the needs of the student, social, emotionally, academically, and again, identify that process and how to keep pushing the most out of the child. Those plans are individualized, so they look different for different kids. And again, we continue to work with our small and mighty team to get information out to the staff and counselors and principals. I believe there was a informational piece that was sent prior to the meeting, correct? That kind of talks about the how, the what, and the why. So what type of questions might you have? Maybe this overview you're still thinking about.
So Chris, you said only 1% qualify for the DEP because you take in the entire student. But what if we have those students, and I'll use math as the easiest one to use, right? So you have a student who's like really excelling at math. They may not encompass the entire student realm that you're looking at, you know, for the whole 1%. But say they're really excelling at math and need more advancement in that area. What are we doing for those students? Do we still have programs for that?
Well, again, we look individually at the child. So along that way, these teams will be bringing in their pools of experts. We might be at some point bringing in a school psychologist, a reading or a math specialist, and looking at setting goals aimed towards that child. Before we would consider going into like a grade or subject acceleration, one has to know, they might be very gifted in that area, but have they mastered all of those standards for that subject in the next grade and the grade above to really get? So that's where it's really only the 1%. But we would still be looking at pushing, setting more opportunities for that child along the way. So some of those goals before a DEP might be other opportunities, some more enrichments that are taking place for a child before they would qualify for the DEP, if that makes sense.
I think so, yeah.
And really earlier in the process, the classroom teacher might run out of some resources, and they're going to call in the building level reading or math coach. Like, hey, you know what? Susie's really doing well. Give me some ideas. And when they get through all of those resources, we might call in the district reading or math experts. We've tried X, Y, and Z. What are some other areas that we could look at to help promote the growth in this child? So there's kind of these steps along the way, and it's making sure, have you tried this and this? Yeah, okay, then let's try this.
Okay. So specifically, how does a DPE benefit a student? If they qualify, what does it actually do besides us kind of tracking them? What do they get out of having a DEP?
That DEP really provides a process for that. We keep that on the radar for the child, and we're continuing to check in to make sure that they're getting more enrichment along the way in those certain areas. And also taking into consideration the social and emotional aspects that the child might have along the way, where, you know, somebody without a DEP, because really to move a greater level above, the younger the child is, they might not be socially ready to necessarily handle older peers. So the DEP would also look at those aspects of the child as well. So.
Okay. Do we ever really look at kids who are, or how do we do this? Like kids who are really acting out, that are obviously intelligent to a student or to a teacher, but aren't pulling the grades, aren't doing it, you know, because so many times there's those kids who are in that high end of the spectrum that don't know how to handle like life. You know what I mean? Like there are behavioral issues with certain personalities and intelligences. So how do we recognize that, and what do we do with that? I mean, I'm making some assumptions in my own mind, but I want to hear it from you, I guess. So.
Well, that's where that 360 would come in, and perhaps I should pull up should I show the 360?
That would be great, Mr. Durkis.
When I pull it up, I'm not going to be able to see you, so please.
Yeah.
Can you see the chart?
Now I can.
Okay, so this chart can really be done in a couple ways. And we've seen teams use it really in two ways. One, where they sit down and as a team talk about each component and rate where the child's skill falls all the way around, looking at all the skills. Sometimes each team member would fill it out before they come to the team meeting, bring it, and then share and compare where they all see the child's skills. So looking from physical health, what type of relationships they have, the behaviors are talked about that. There's another document that goes where you can take notes and talk about that, so we can monitor the different skills and subject matter along with possibly the behaviors. So there's kind of a deeper conversation about why, you know, we're seeing these behaviors. Maybe the behavior, I'm going to stop showing so I can see everybody. Maybe the behavior only happens in mathematics, and that can be part of that conversation where they're seeing it there. Is the child, one, maybe struggling, because we could use this for a child who's struggling or a child who's advancing, or maybe the child isn't challenged enough. So those could be part of the conversations that the team would have.
Okay.
Pam or Jason, you can chime in for any pieces maybe I've skimmed too quickly on.
Just going to say that 360 conversation, as in addition to what Mr. Durkis outlined, it's really allows folks to identify the area that is in greatest need. And it also allows us to have some conversations about what are the strengths of that student and what are those strengths that we can leverage as we're identifying that focus area. So in addition to what Mr. Durkis said, I think it's really essential to have that conversation about a focus area and strengths as well.
Okay. So our Excel program now isn't just about like furthering knowledge in Excel classes, but right now you're speaking more directly about moving grade levels kind of thing. Is that correct?
It really depends individually for a child. Some children can be twice accelerated or once accelerated. Sometimes it could be a whole grade. It might be a subject matter. Maybe one subject is really the area of growth.
Right.
And as they get older, they might be taking some college courses, IB classes, it could be some other enrichments. So it's really individualized for each child. It's not like two different students with a DP, they have completely different paths. So it's really looking at just the child.
And the
So
goal, Kathy, the goal of the programming and you know, kind of the system is to really, as Chris started out talking about the process, is to look at those students who really have that truly unique, you know, gift and talent. It's part of that, you know, that gifted and talented umbrella, and looking at how do we make sure that those students that are really on that end of the spectrum, that we're making sure that we're meeting those needs. And that's where that differentiated education plan becomes really that support. It's kind of their individualized plan, you know, as Chris said, because there's so many things that are going on with that student. We just want to make sure that we continue to enrich their programming, but also to support all those other things that may be going on. And so when we think about the Excel programming, it's really, it's that general enrichment idea, like we enrich learning for all students. But at some point, we have to look at those students who are continuing to extend beyond the rest of their peers. And as Chris said, demonstrating that they are developing proficiencies in their current grade level and advanced grade level. And now we're at a point where we need to really think about more an individualized approach for them. And so I'll give you an example. We have a teacher at second grade who said, you know, I have a student that's moving through things pretty quickly. And so that teacher engaged in this 360 process to start developing plans to really dig into what Chris was talking about. Does the student have really deep knowledge on each of the current grade level standards? Once the teacher works through that with the student, they'll continue to monitor, are they now able to really start to demonstrate some understanding of the next grade level standards to see what is the scope of the student's ability, but also just to make sure we don't miss anything. Because when we think about trying to move students forward, we don't want to take away the opportunities to make sure they get the learning of the current grade level by just assuming. And so the teacher's going through each of the skills and really making sure that depth of understanding is solid, so that if there are any gaps, we're addressing them before we make any decisions about a potential acceleration of a grade level or a subject area.
And how long have we had this process in place here at the MPSB?
The process for acceleration has been in place for a bit, but this process of looking at the whole child and this planning process is relatively new. I would say probably in the last couple of years. And so teams are starting. We used to have a more of a building base, they call it a building consultation team process. And it wasn't quite as formalized, and people struggled with how do we know, how do we make sure? And so we tried to develop a process that allows people to really go through some steps to make sure that when they're making decisions about things like acceleration, about the implementation of a DEP, that they really have really looked at the child completely, and they've looked at the learning that this child has had along the way to make sure that the student has that depth of understanding to really be able to handle if we would pull them into a more advanced opportunity. So
okay, Oh, that's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
You know,
this
one
new-
of, one, oh, sorry.
Go
Chris,
ahead,
go
Mr.
ahead.
Trask.
Okay. One of the things that concerns me with skill testing and accelerated content and skills like math and that is that the other whole dimension of a human being is imagination, creativity, and artistic expression. And I would even throw in critical thinking. And I just wonder if that gets crowded in somehow.
At times, it's much more frequent for a student to be identified in English and mathematics, but
Yeah.
a child can be accelerated in the fine arts.
Okay, that's good. Yeah.
And in all it really, in any aspect of learning, it's more frequent to be identified in this course.
We have had students, musicians, who, really have a musical talent. And so the DEP is directed towards that and how to develop their and expand their opportunities to continue to enrich their musical talent. It would be the same with the student who demonstrates. And again, it's that really unique kind, as Chris said, that 1% of the students who really have a very unique profile that we would develop those and work towards developing those plans. And again, a lot of that conversation is a part of that planning process, and then bringing in some people who have expertise in those areas to really look at how to identify, that, and then also how to develop it further.
And this 360 process, really, we have this team collaboration where years ago it was more one person. So now we really get a better looking with a group of professionals and making a more quality plan and making sure the whole child is considered in this process.
Hey, well, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. It gives us a lot of insight into the program and how that all works. So thanks for coming tonight. And, I know your boss is here, but you're free to go.
Well,
I don't want to bore you with the rest of our stuff. I don't know, maybe you like that, but that's okay.
Well, I don't know if it'd be boring, but I appreciate that so much, and thank you for the opportunity to for this quick overview. So,
Yeah. Thanks,
Thank
Fred.
you.
Thank you, Chris.
thank you.
Okay. Pam, I think you are the one who's going to walk through some of the reporting specifically for Jefferson and Franklin for us tonight.
Yes. So
All
this
right.
is a report to the board. It's, the initial step will be the curriculum committee, and then the full board through the minutes will have access to all of the reporting documents that you have as a part of this. We are required, because Jefferson and Franklin are two AGR schools, they are required to submit a report to the board at the semester breaks. So this end of first semester, and even though semester ends in January, there's some data collection that needs to take place at the end of the semester. So typically the report is given in February, and then at the end of the year, they'll also do a closeout of the year report. And basically for Franklin and Jefferson, they have a responsibility to set some goals and targets for kindergarten through third grade reading and math. And as a part of that process, we have to identify a strategy that we are going to utilize. The three strategies that are allowed to be utilized for AGR are small class sizes, instructional coaching, and then tutoring. And so for us, typically, we have done small class sizes, and we continue to keep that in mind. But with some of the dynamics of the elementary model for this year, the teams really elected to focus a lot on trying to provide that instructional coaching support to the staff members, because of the fact that there has been a lot of transition. There continues to be a lot of transition. Students come into in-person learning, then they go to virtual learning, sometimes as whole groups, sometimes by just, the choices that families make. And so the consistency that we really needed for this year those teams really felt would be developed through instructional coaching. And so that's really their identified strategy for this year. And each year they pick. There have been times in the past where we've done small class sizes and really focused on that as our key strategy when we didn't have coaches, or when we were initially having our coaches come in, but they weren't quite working as cohesively with some of our schools. And so we've utilized that as a main strategy. But at this point in time, and in the situation that we're at, both schools felt as though the instructional coaching was truly the model that they wanted to commit to. So just going to give you kind of a big overview, and then if you have questions, please feel free to ask. So at Franklin, they really chose to look at, for reading, they chose to look at the letters and sounds assessment. Both Franklin and Jefferson are looking at that for kindergarten level, which is a early readiness measure for them. And so they're using that assessment as a measure for determining whether or not students are closing gaps enough to achieve proficiency on that and achieving that readiness. And so you see some baseline in their overall report, but right now where they're at, they have about 64% of the students at the current level that they should be at in that assessment, and about another 9% of the students are approaching where they should be at. So they're really looking to try to get all 100% of their students, all of their students, proficient on that assessment by the end of the year. And so as you can see, they're on target to do that. And again, they're looking at the benchmarks for where students should be at this point in the year.
So are you talking about overall, like all of the subject areas, or just specifically one?
This is for reading. This is for reading.
For reading. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And then for kindergarten math, they've been utilizing the Bridges assessments to really take a look at where are the gaps that students have and how can we close some gaps. So there's some screener assessments in Bridges that they've been utilizing, and they've taken that data to determine where do students have the gaps. They're addressing the gaps, and then they use some of the mid-unit assessments and then the post or the end of unit assessments to really determine, are the students making progress on those skill sets. And so when they're using that at kindergarten level, they're really looking at trying to determine, can 80% of our students get to where they need to be on those assessments, those Bridges assessments, by the end of the year? Because that would mean that the students, generally, our curriculum is providing students with the skill sets that they need and is meeting the needs of the student. They're really looking to, ideally, they'd like to get 100% of students there, but they also know that there are some students coming in with some significant gaps, and getting them all the way to proficiency on that grade level assessment may not be totally realistic. So at this point in time, what they're seeing is that about 88% of their kindergarten students are at the proficiency level they should be in the Bridges curriculum to be able to make that end of the year goal of proficiency on the overall assessment at the end of the year. And about 6% of the students are close to that. And so they're making some progress towards that. But again, it's important to keep in mind it's at this point in the year, and the Bridges assessments are set up that way. They're kind of a benchmark assessment to do that. And then for reading, for grades 1 through 3, the team has been electing to use running records. They have A to Z passage system that they have some passages that they can use to do running records on students, and really just measuring whether or not students are at the reading level, the defined reading level for their grade level. Now, they are looking to see that all students are making at least 1 year's growth. So they want students to get to proficiency, but students that are significantly behind in reading, they're saying we would like to at least make sure that we make 1 year's growth with all of those students. And so even though right now they're really not able to say, have they completed a full year's worth of growth, they're giving you information on how many students are at grade level proficiency at this point in time in those grade levels. So at first grade, they have about 30% of the students proficient, second grade about 28, and another 18% that are close to their grade level proficiency where they should be at for this time in the year. And then at third grade, about 25%. So you can see that students are not quite there. And so there you've got some work to do to continue to move forward. Hoping to get as many students as possible back on track. So at grade level proficiency, but if they're not able to achieve that, at least making sure those students, all students are growing, and all students are growing at a rate that's going to allow them to close gaps. And so that's what they're looking at for reading.
Pam,
And then,
sorry, I'm really confused because in that baseline performance level for first grade reading, it said they're below 74% are below. And then in second grade, it says 65% below, and in third, 71% below. Am I not reading this correctly?
that was at the beginning of the year.
Oh,
At the very beginning, and I'm giving you the update for the middle of the year. I apologize, Kathy.
Right.
I wasn't very clear on that, so thank you for
well, and
pointing that out.
I was really alarmed.
Yeah.
So
No,
I'm glad
that was the beginning of the year assessment, and then this is
Okay.
a reflection of as they've been working towards that. And again, it's a little bit difficult because they want to achieve growth for all students, but right now what they're able to report on is how many are actually just at proficiency where they should be. So,
Okay.
but
That
thank
makes
you.
more sense with the term baseline in there, and I
Yeah.
just kind of didn't put that all together the right way. Sorry about that.
No, I apologize. I should have been more clear on that. And then in math, they're looking at the Bridges assessments, and again, looking at where are the students currently on their grade level proficiency, and again, shooting for as many students as possible getting to proficiency, but also every student at least making a year's growth if they're not at proficiency. And so math scores are a little bit higher in terms of the number of students at proficiency, grade level proficiency right now, with grade 1 at about 72%, and with another 8% getting close. Grade 2 at 51%, and another 27% are close to where they should be. And grade 3, 35% are currently proficient to where they should be, and another 24 are close. So you can see that students are moving in the right direction. So that goal of really trying to let's get as many of them there as we can, but also make sure every student is moving forward, is helping them to really achieve some good outcomes for kids. I did ask them to
Why are the numbers going down so dramatically from 72 to 35 between? Why, what's happening there?
I think it depends, Carrie, on where they're starting from. In terms of it's a different grade levels are starting at different points. And what I would say is that I think the curriculum, we have to keep in mind that the curriculum develops more rigor over time. So not only in each grade level over the course of the year, but also each year, the depth of skills get more complicated. We have a new math series this year. The Bridges math curriculum is new to us. It is a curriculum that really aligns well to the Common Core standards and helping to build that depth of knowledge in math that students should have, that skill set. So it wouldn't be unusual for us to see that some of our students may struggle because it's a different kind of learning than we had previously in the curriculum that we were using. And so there's just a lot of different factors that could play into that.
You know, is our new math curriculum one that parents are able to help their kids? I mean, I've heard that so many times through the years that with our new curriculums that we keep coming out with, that parents feel as though they're not equipped to help their children. So is this one that actually parents understand? Or is this like kind of that bizarre, like you can do this? I mean, I don't even get it because I grew up old school. So, and thankfully so did my kids, so we could help them. But I've heard that through the years with new curriculums coming out, you know, the new math and all those things. Is this a curriculum they can help with?
I would say that the curriculum is most definitely different than our previous. So previous curriculum was math expression. This is Bridges. And I would say that the piece that there are a lot of pieces, but one piece that I'm excited about is the infusion of play
Mhm.
and really looking for students to play while they're learning math.
Mhm.
That in and of itself is the component that our parents can really grab onto and support at home. And we've purchased, through the last year, we've purchased extra resources. So every student had math manipulatives at home to play with. And we'll continue to communicate with our parents as this is, we're really committed to kind of a 3-4 year implementation. That's an area that will continue to grow in communicating and educating our parents on how they can support that resource at home.
Yeah, it seems like a mini training program for our parents would be in order for something like that. I know as a parent, if I had a child in a program like that, I would have appreciated that. So,
And I know Jefferson, for example, is working on a model where, as a part of their parent engagement, they're preparing videos to share with families on how to play math games and then providing some of the resources for families to play the math game. So they have a little video that you can watch to see, this is how you could play this math game with your kindergarten student. And then they send home the resources so to make sure that families can engage with that. So they're trying to do some things in small ways to help kind of move families forward, but like Jason said, make it fun so that it's really an opportunity to spend some quality family time together too, and not just about homework and continuing school. So trying to infuse that fun into it. So I did ask Franklin and Jefferson both to provide kind of a summary from the teacher's lens of the things that they are really doing specifically to help kind of address what they're seeing in terms of their data. And so at the end of each report, you see that summary from the teacher's lens. But just some of the highlights are things that, we're seeing that PLC collaboration with the math coach really supporting teams and supporting teachers and how to implement the Bridges curriculum with success, and the reading teachers talking through how to implement the components of the units of study with success with teachers. So they're spending time in classrooms, but they're also spending time in those PLC conversations, working through some of that with the different staff members. They're really supporting the identification of those gaps and doing data digs with the teams to make sure that teachers are looking at the gaps and then strategizing how are we going to close those gaps and provide some of that instruction. So when we were full virtual, teachers were doing that intervention and instruction in the afternoons for elementary level. Now that we're back into more in-person model, the blended model, they're infusing that into the classroom during the classroom day. And so there's times that they have set aside during their lessons to really focus in on some of that individualized support with students. And additionally, the reading staff and the math coaches are really working to help provide that support as well and doing some interventions for students themselves. And I should mention, in terms of reading, we also have our EL team, and for both reading and math special education are providing that support. So it's kind of an all hands on deck to go through the data, process it, and then develop some of these plans for intervening with students. At Franklin, I would also say that they have done a nice job through their leadership team, working on really making sure that teachers are being clear of the learning targets for students so that they're really speaking to what is it I need to come out of this lesson with, and how will I know once I've got it? And so they've spent a lot of time kind of going through and having conversations about how to do that effectively, and then practicing it and getting feedback from their principal and getting feedback from each other on how's it going with that, so that they can make sure that they have that clarity. And that's something that their leadership team has grabbed onto and helped to kind of spearhead this year at Franklin. That's a lot of information on Franklin. I just wanted to give you a minute if you have any other questions, but great questions along the way. Okay, I'm going to flip and try to do Jefferson. They did a little bit different approach, and I really, the way that they approach it is both leaders went to their teachers and said, here's the situation. We don't have the typical data sets that we normally would use. how are we going to grab data that's going to help us to determine where the gaps are and how to address them? And so both leaders did that, and that's why you see the differences here in terms of how they approach this process. Similarly to the Franklin group, the kindergarten group chose to focus on that letter sounds assessment. And so they really are looking at trying to make sure they get 80% of the students to where they should be at the end of the year on that assessment. And that's the 52 letters, uppercase and lowercase, and then 26 sounds. And so you can see where the students are at thus far in that. So they have a pretty solid group of students who are knowing their letters, but still have some work to do on those uppercase sounds and lowercase sounds.
Mm-hmm.
And then with reading, what they chose to do was really to take a look at the phonics programming that we have put in place. There's some screeners that are a part of that program that give the sense of whether or not students have those early literacy skills. And so what they did was, for first grade, they said, well, if students have gaps coming out of kindergarten, we need to start and make sure that we get those gaps addressed and then continue to move them forward. And so the first grade group went all the way back to the kindergarten assessment and said, we want to make sure that they're solid on that kindergarten assessment, and then we're going to start to move them into that first grade assessment to make sure we're addressing those gaps. So that's why you see at first grade some proficiency on kindergarten assessments and letter sounds, snap words, and developmental spelling. And then in the mid-year point now, they're introducing the first grade snap words and developmental spelling assessment to see whether or not kids are continuing to have gaps as they come into first grade. And so the proficiency that they've given you in the report really takes a look at both of those components together. And really what their goal is to conquer that kindergarten. For all first graders, will conquer the kindergarten assessment and many of them, or most of them, will be very proficient on the first grade assessments as well by the end of the year. And so it's a pretty lofty goal. They know that, but they're working towards that anyway, just to make sure that they close as many gaps as possible. Second grade took the same approach with reading and went back to the first grade assessment at the start of the year, did that assessment, working on closing gaps. Now we're at the mid-year point. They gave the second grade assessment and are starting to add that into their work in closing gaps for students. So they'll do that combination of first and second grade. And then for third grade, they gave the second grade assessment and said, anybody that's not on target with that second grade assessment, we want to get them to target on that by the end of the year so we can close that gap for them. So that's kind of how they approached reading, just a little bit different than what Franklin did. And then in math, they're very similar in terms of their target on having students demonstrate proficiency on those power standards that are tied to our Bridges curriculum and Bridges assessments. But what they did that's unique is they are measuring it standard by standard. And so you can see their report's a little lengthy and very in-depth, but they are taking a look at it standard by standard and making sure those kids are developing those skills. And what they have done is they've put in a data protocol that allows them to do that. So their math coaches worked with them to collect the data, bring it to the table, and then really dig in and identify which students aren't getting it and what are we going to do about it. So that math coach is really involved in that process. Similarly, their reading teachers have also adapted the same data analysis protocol for looking at reading data and making sure that they're pulling that information forward. And so the nice thing about that is that because they're using a similar system, everybody's on the same page, whether we're talking reading, whether we're talking math, eventually it'll be a science and social studies, art, music, and FIAT, whatever we're talking about, they're all talking the same language because they're using the same protocol. So it's a nice system that they've developed for that. The other thing I would like to point out for Jefferson that's unique is that I had the great fortune to sit in on it, but they have started to have their teachers have been really open to wanting to grow. And so their teachers who are sharing their videotape lessons and asking for feedback from the entire staff. So I sat in a staff meeting where one of their teachers shared her math lesson, and the rest of the staff viewed it and then spent some time talking about what did they notice about the purposeful things that the teacher did to help give feedback to students, help ask higher level questioning, and how did the students respond to that. And so they spent time in breakout groups looking at that, and then shared as a whole group. And then the math coach came in and talked about some of the things that she noticed in terms of some really strong math practices that the teacher implemented, and then offered some suggestions about how the teacher might extend her practice next time. So it was just a great talk about a PD session it was, I think, about a 45-minute staff meeting. They were busy, they were engaged, and that was a fantastic PD because everybody really got to kind of think and practice and take a look at, well, how can I do that? And I do know that they have more teachers interested in doing that. They have PLC teams saying, we want somebody to give us feedback. Can we share our videos and have people give us our feedback? So kudos to them for taking that risk, but also for the growth that's coming out of it. It was just amazing to listen to their conversation in that staff meeting. So that's the high level overview of Jefferson. Questions?
No, I was just thinking that sounds a lot like student teaching and mentorship, though.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right?
I was totally, I got to tell you, Kathy, I was totally amazed and in awe at the level of conversation. And it was like you wanted to take that snippet and put it out on the greatest professional development opportunity, because just the way that they were engaging and sharing, supporting each other, but also, extending each other and saying, have you thought about this? Or I really liked when you did that, but what about if you did this? And so it was some really great opportunities to see them at work and know that, like, that's happening when they're in those collaborative days. That's happening in those collaboration meetings as well. It's not just in the staff meeting, but they're doing it all the time. So
Well, I feel like you can tell it's good because of your excitement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. And I did tell them, like, I wish all I could say was, wow, wow, this was just absolutely amazing. So we do have the highest quality staff you're going to find in this district. And that has made, when you see something like that, and that people are concerned about students growing and developing, we've got teachers making sure our students are growing and developing and working really hard at that. So I just kudos to them. It's just fantastic.
Well, how does that phrase go about like you're not just as an individual, we can all do our own thing, but when we have more minds, we're so much greater. Mm-hmm. So when we have that bonding between all those teachers going toward a common goal, that just makes everything better.
Absolutely.
For them, for the students, for the families, the whole shebang. So that's cool.
So with AGR, again, we'll have a report at the end of the year. And then I did want to just let you know that we're up for renewing our application for AGR. So Franklin and Jefferson will be working through that. There's a state form that they have to complete that just goes through the application. It's a 5-year application process, and we're at the end of our 5 years.
Now, they get extra funding for AGR, right? For doing that.
Yeah, to help support the interventions that they put in place. Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's what I assume that, but I thought I should ask. So, okay.
So Pam, at the board meeting, is that something that we approve as a board, the mid-year report, or that's more at the end of the year? We don't do any approval?
It's more of a informational. It just has to be shared. And so sharing it here and then having it shared as a part of the minutes for the curriculum committee will suffice. All right. Awesome.
Okay. And then the last thing I asked Jason and Pam to just update us on is our parent and student engagement surveys and where that's at in the process here.
Yes, thank you. For the last several years, we have worked with School Perceptions, our partner for all things surveys, and we've executed a student engagement survey and a parent engagement survey. And we've traditionally done that, I think, mid-October, and the window typically closes mid-November. And I believe at that time we were transitioning to full distance learning, so we didn't want to add another survey. So we met with our school perceptions partners this week, and we have kind of centered around executing this, both the student and parent engagement surveys, April 26th through May 10th. And took a lot of things into consideration, including our assessment calendar for state assessment. And we're confident that all or most of our state assessments will be completed then. And it'll be a nice time to get some feedback from parents and students alike. We also talked about what will the surveys look like. Traditionally, these surveys have been primarily or completely focused on engagement. And we've challenged our school perception partners to really weave in 4 components. So the surveys themselves will look a little different this year. It'll be a mix of how's it going? How did this year go for you? And again, it'll be similar, some of the same questions, but some different for parent and student. There'll be a section completely dedicated to engagement, like we have seen. There'll be some questions around equity, which will be new for us. And then there'll be 1 or 2 questions around looking forward to next year, and really focusing on distance learning and gauging the support of full distance learning and interest. And we're not going to hold folks to that, but we want to get some data around what's the support and what's the level of interest. So again, those 4 components, similar for students and parents. We just received draft copies of those surveys this morning. So we'll spend some time talking about it as a director team. We've shared with some leaders to get their feedback. We're working towards finalizing the timeline and both surveys next week, and then work on our communication plans to get those surveys out.
So Jason, those will be online surveys then, or will they be mailers?
Yeah, they're executed for our parents through Infinite Campus. So everyone gets a unique email, and then every student of ours has an MPSD email, and we used that last year with success as well.
Okay, and will there be included a commentary section, a comment section for parents in particular?
I believe there are comments always, but I believe so, but I can double check that when we look more in the draft.
I think, we may have some insight to things if we get, of course, we might get comments that we don't want to, aren't pleasant to read, but at the same time, we may gather some insight from having that, so.
Absolutely.
Jason, at what age do you start surveying students? What grade
students,
level?
4 through 12 we survey. Grades 4 through 12.
Oh, okay. And do you get pretty good responses from 4th graders?
We do. I think this would be our 4th year for the student engagement survey. So, minus that 4th grade, our students are kind of used to it. And our staff, again, does a wonderful job of supporting students through it. So.
Okay, great.
The kids probably love doing it. They're probably being asked to participate. They're probably like, yeah.
So we'll definitely keep you in the loop as that proceeds. And then we usually, whenever the window closes, we're looking at May 10th. It takes several weeks for school perceptions to give us the reports, but when we have all the reports, we'll give an update through the curriculum committee. Thank you.
Very good. All right. That is the end of our agenda. I do want to ask a quick question of this team. I'm wondering if starting in March, if you all would be available to start at 5:30 instead of 6. I begin a new cycle of my doctoral classes, and they're on Thursday nights this next round. And they start at 7, and just recognizing like we don't usually end by 7. Kathy and Carrie, would that be okay with you all to start at 5:30 instead?
It'd be
That's
fine
good
with
for
me.
me, yeah. It's-
Okay. Jason and
problem.
Pam, does that work for you both as well?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So if we can make that happen on our next round of this team's invitations, that would be awesome. And that way I can be in class on time.
Okay, I do
Could
have a
we
question.
even do it earlier? I mean,
Yeah, that's fine.
people
with
have to stay late from work.
Yeah. Well, I usually get home from work about 5. So
Okay, yeah, okay,
yeah.
that's cool then. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, whatever works. I have a quick question, you guys, or I hope it's a quick question. We did get some emails in the past week or two regarding our 6th graders and electives, and if they're getting them or not. What's happening with our not electives, I'm sorry, with music, art, and Phy-Ed at the middle school level, well, 6th grade level. Are we on task with that? I'm a little alarmed by some of the information I've been receiving. I've been informed that there are a lot of kids who have not received those various classes that they're supposed to have according to the DPI, and what it's going to take to get them those courses. So what's happening with that? And I guess I don't think we're required for a certain number of minutes over the year, and yet I did read something on the DPI website that said where music is supposed to have, is it twice a week, 120 minutes or something like this. I forget what it is, but anyway, what are we doing about that?
The middle school leaders have worked through the process of when we get back to the full face-to-face schedule, they've looked at all of that, and there will be some shifts in the students in terms of some of the electives to make sure that students are getting those opportunities. So as they've worked through that, Kathy, they have gone through each student to make sure that students have what they have. I think at Washington, they found out students had plenty of Phy-Ed, but some students need a little bit more in art and music. And so they're gonna, take and shift over some of that time. And again, part of the challenge was in trying to keep the cohorted groups, and assigning the electives to the cohorted groups. They knew that we were going to have a little bit of an issue coming, as we get back to face and more fluid learning, that trying to get that back on track. But they've spent some time digging through that and have come up with a plan to make sure that every student gets those opportunities. So they'll still have those elective periods in their schedule the way that they have, and some of the kids will be shifting some of those electives to make sure they get what they need.
Okay, I was a little alarmed though that we hadn't addressed that all along the school year, that we had made sure some of the kids got some of those as they went along instead of all the random courses being assigned. And I think that's, now we're in trouble for that. Now we're at this point where we have to cram this stuff in, and I'm very concerned about that. So, and as you know, I'm an art person, so I see value in those classes. So I am disappointed that it doesn't have more of a priority for certain people. So, and that we're trying to like all of a sudden scramble to do what the kids are supposed to have. So, wondered what was happening with that. So.
Yeah, I guess I would just articulate that you have to understand in the pandemic, when we had half days of school, that we had to make a priority, and our priority was reading, writing, and math and science.
Right.
That we couldn't provide a full day of learning and the same amount of electives as we had before. And every school in Wisconsin that had any kind of virtual, blended, or modified face-to-face had to make some adjustments to that. I mean, it's not that we don't care and don't want to follow that model. It's just that we had to make a decision based on not having school in person every day in that blended model and keeping our cohort. So we're working through that process. And again, I haven't seen, the communications that you're receiving. I'm hoping that the principals have gotten them. I don't know that, but I know, having conversations with our county schools and our regional schools, that there isn't anyone who has followed all the state guidelines across this whole system. It just, because you had to reduce something, and you
Right.
like to reduce math, science, social studies, and language arts.
Yeah. And I get that with the electives, like the issues with that, but when we're talking about sixth grade and it's required, like it's not required for seventh and eighth graders, but with the sixth grade it is. So, you know,
Right. But yeah, and again, I think we're working through the process, but if we have, you know, in our current model, 2 days per week that we're, you know, kids get to come to school,
mhm.
you know, we're really working hard on making sure that we can keep all of those core classes and work through that process. Something has to give, right? And so
Right.
the frequency of art, music, and FIED was something that we gave in order to make sure that we could provide math, science, social studies, and language arts on a more consistent basis. But we'll get back to that, right?
Okay.
And I know that in our system, right, we typically have more art, music, and FIED than other schools. So in a typical year, you know, that's we engage that at the elementary, middle school model greater than what typically is out there. We used to be, you know, 5 years ago, our district had 30 minutes of music 2 times per week, right? And 45 minutes of art once per week. And so now we're looking at 45 minutes every 3 days. So, I mean, we engaged in that. We'll get back to that. And again, I don't know if that's a large group of folks who are trying to work through it or just a few. I haven't heard from any of those folks. So again, if you want to forward that to the principals or myself, we'll try.
So if we do run into issues, do we need to have a waiver for some of those minutes or something?
Yeah, we can talk about that. I mean, we can be transparent about, we haven't likely met the 2 times per week all the time for all kids. But like I said, I have a meeting coming up, and Pam and I had some conversations about the waiver. If we have to, we'll go that route. But I'm pretty sure the DPI is not going to ask us about that, because all schools, unless you were in 5 days a week from the beginning of the year until now, you don't have met the requirements.
Okay.
So we'll talk about that, and then that might be something that we want to bring forward to the full board. Let me find out a little bit more about the DPI's request there, and then we'll get back to the committee.
Yeah, and I would think too, like, it depends on how we sort this through and how much kids will get between now and the end of the year too. Would make a difference.
Yeah. Either way, we won't meet the state requirement.
Okay.
The minutes isn't the issue. It's the idea that they say you're supposed to have, and most of it isn't FIED. You're supposed to have FIED like every semester, 2 or 3 times per week. Like, we're just not meeting that.
Well,
And I get it, right? But I don't know how anybody else is meeting that.
Right.
So,
Some of us have had it every day, all year long. Just saying. And they encourage parent involvement, which, you know, is always interesting.
yeah, good. How's the pogo stick, Meredith? Have you got that down yet?
No, but me, and I tell you what, doing a sit up after so many years, it ain't easy.
Well,
You're just supposed to sit on his knee, on his feet, Meredith. You're not actually supposed to be the one that does that, right?
Oh, well, yeah. Tell that to him. Anyway, okay, we're digressing, and I'm hungry. I haven't had dinner yet. So if we have a motion to adjourn, I would gladly entertain that.
Yes, I'll make the motion to adjourn this meeting.
And I can go ahead and so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, meeting adjourned.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Dinner,
Thank
dinner.
you. Yeah, it's dinner time. See you later.
Right. Night.
Okay.